Okay, guys, we're going to start on chapter 13 of Claire Rides the Rancho. If you weren't able to listen to chapter 12, you didn't miss too much. So we're just going to go get started. Big Trouble. December 26, 1845, Rancho de los Osos. With Cody in the lead, we walked north. After a while, Cody ran off the main path and down to a narrow trail through the dry grass. He seemed to know where he was going, so I followed him. I remembered that I had seen what I had seen from the cupola that morning, that I could tell that we were heading toward the creek. In the distance, I heard the laughter of children and the voices of Indian women as they washed clothes. Before we reached the creek, Cody turned to the right. The trail widened, and under the shelter of several large trees, I saw a cluster of small brush homes. I thought to myself, this must be the village where the Indians and their families live. Cody ran past several of the homes, and when I caught up with him, he was sitting next to an elderly Indian woman in front of a low burning fire. The woman looked up and motioned for me to sit down. She was using a long looped stick to lift a hot rock out of the fire. She slowly lowered the hot rock into a basket of water. Without letting the rock fall from the loop stick, she dipped it in and down up and down in the water. The ashes that clung to the rock were washed away, and then the woman gently placed the hot rock into another basket that was half filled with mush. She used the loop stick to move the rock around and around in the mush until I could see steam rising. I realized that she was using the hot rock to cook the mush. After several minutes, the woman lifted the rock out of the mush, washed it off, and placed it back into the fire. Then she dipped a small carved wooden spoon into the mush and offered it to me. I couldn't understand the words that she spoke, but I took the spoon from her and tasted the mush. It tasted like sweet roasted nuts. I smiled. This is very good. What is it? The woman looked into my eyes. She knew I couldn't understand her language. Her brown eyes sparkled, and from the basket behind her, she took out a handful of acorns, and she gave them to me. I had learned about acorns from Padre Francisco. He had told me that when the Spanish padres and the soldiers first came to California in 1769, many of them had almost starved to death. The Indians had brought the baskets of acorn mush and the fish and saved their lives. This is acorn mush, I said aloud, and the woman smiled and offered me more mush. We ate the mush and talked together by using sign language. When we finished, the woman stood up and motioned for me to follow her. We walked to one of the brush homes and sat down on a woven mat in front of the home. On the ground around us were bundles of grasses, reeds, and twigs. There were small baskets filled with bird feathers and tiny seashells. The Indian woman picked up a half-finished basket, then carefully selected thin strips of grass and skillfully woven them into a small oval basket. A black diamond design zigzagged its way around the basket. It reminded me of the markings of a rattlesnake. Cody and I sat for a long time watching her weave. When I stood up to leave, I said, "Thank you for sharing your acorn mush with me." The woman nodded and smiled. Her eyes twinkled, and I realized as I walked away that never before had I learned so much and spoken so little. I followed Cody as he wound his way through the Indian village. The village was deserted, and the Indian vaqueros were either working on the rancho or out with Uncle Frank and Father rounding up the stray cattle. The Indian women and children moved down the creek. At the end of the village, I noticed a small whitewashed adobe home. A horse was tied to the post near the door. "I wonder who lives in there," I said to Cody. Not a moment later, my question was answered. The door opened and out came Luis. He mounted his horse and headed toward the corral, not even seeing Cody and me. We walked past the adobe home. This must be where Luis, Ernesto, and Elena live, I thought to myself. "Let's go down to the corral, Cody, and see what Luis is doing." Cody barked. When we reached the corral, Cody and I slipped under the fence, and I called, "Hola, ¿dónde estás? Where are you, Luis?" I opened the door of one of the small adobe buildings, expecting to see Luis. There was a loud snort and a sound of air blowing through nostrils. Right in front of me was a huge, white-faced bull with monstrous horns. "Oh, help! Help!" My lips moved, but no sound came out. The bull rolled his bloodshot eyes at me, and I gasped and started to step backward. The bull moved forward, his eyes burning with anger, and suddenly there was a blur of black and white fur between me and the bull. It was Cody. Cody snarled, and the saliva dripped from his fangs. The bull lowered his head. One quick thrust of the bull's pointed horns would have sent the dog flying into the air. Cody danced around the bull like a yellow jacket after fresh meat, and the bull hesitated for a few seconds. My legs were like rubber. My feet felt as if they were glued to the ground, but in those few seconds I managed to run to the fence and slip under it. Cody showed no fear. He kept barking furiously and whipped in and out between the bull's legs, his jaws snapping viciously. He refused to move out of the bull's path, and when Cody saw that I was safe, he made a run for the fence. The bull charged and hit the heavy wooden gate with a loud thwack, and the bull fell backward on its rear end, and his eyes rolled back into his head. He let out a long moo. Catching my breath, I grabbed Cody's fur and buried my face in his soft coat. His tail wagged in huge circles, and his eyes crinkled shut. Cody, you saved my life. You're the bravest dog in the world. We both looked at the bull, who was staring at us with a dazed look. In the distance, I heard Mother's whistle. Cody barked. I was ready to go home.